From the Ticats Audio Network, this is a Ticats This Week, built by Turkstra. Whatever your next home project is, build it better with Turkstra. Visit TurkstraLumber.com today.
Thanks for joining us for Ticats This Week. I'm RJ Broadhead along with Mike Daly, Luke Tasker, Steve Milton. The Tiger Cats, tough home and home against the CFL's top team, the Montreal Alouettes at 7-1. They will meet again on Saturday in Montreal. The Tiger Cats are 2-6. On last week, it was a 33-16 loss to Montreal, and it seemed at one point, especially when they got the pick six, the Kenneth George pick six, that the Tiger Cats were in a good spot to beat Montreal and really turn the CFL season upside down, or nobody knows who's going to win. Did you feel the same way, Steve, that the Ticats, this was one that they had a real opportunity to beat the top team?
100%, RJ, and I felt that way through much of the game. Even when Montreal started to take over a bit, I thought if they can just get a couple of plays here and the offense can. I mean, it was there. I mean, and Bo was doing the right thing much of the way in terms of taking the short yardage that was there. But then they got beaten on too many plays, both offensively and defensively, man-on-man plays. I don't mean it was man-on-man coverage, but when it came to the play. And they made some really, really great plays, Montreal did, many of them, on offense and defense. And I think Bo missed some really good opportunities there. It was unfortunate that in that game, with the defense finally playing so well and looking like the defense they thought they had, that Bo didn't rise as well. And he was the first guy to say that immediately after the game, as he always is.
Luke, what do you feel went wrong in that game for the Tiger Cats?
Yeah, you think it wasn't the best Bo Levi Mitchell performance that we've seen. And just like Steve said, you heard it from him, and he not happy with how that went. But it's the quarterback is just the middleman of the passing game. The offensive line has to start. It starts with them, and then it ends at the catch. And I do think the offensive line has played pretty well this year. I think we've seen a lot of maybe the best offensive line performance across the board, in my opinion, since we've been broadcasting together, RJ.
Luke, to jump in there, to back up what you're saying, it's the second week in a row the Tiger Cats offensive line has made the honor roll. Coincidentally, Jordan Murray's been back for 2 games. I don't know if that's the main reason, but he's certainly a good offensive lineman. But you're right, Luke. Carry on. 2 weeks in a row, top offensive line in the honor roll.
And it's just it's noticeable. I don't think that we have not seen them lose too many of their battles, and this was against a very good defense. And then of course the quarterback in his play, and Bo was not at his best. But I want to finish with the receiving core, and I'm just not seeing cohesive quarterback to receiver connections. Only so much that we can know watching the game, but I really think there's a lot of times out there where receivers are not throttling down in between linebackers. Maybe is the simplest way to say it. Like just getting really in phase with the quarterback is a term we used. Being quarterback friendly and giving Bo the posture and the body language to know that you're about to come out at the right pace and energy that I think you are, and that's not happening. And I think there's times where the ball is low or behind, and maybe that is a bad throw. Certainly, like I said, I don't think Bo did play his best game there, not his average game even. But I just sense that there's just some real whether it's unclear play call or assignment, or just poor execution. I think that if Bo, to be inside the helmet, if you could really know, I think Bo would be frustrated with some of the route running and the body language of his receiving core, and I think it's showing. I think they're not finishing drives, and I think they're struggling on their second downs because of that.
Lot there, Luke, we're going to chat about. You raised some good points. Mike, let's get your thoughts on the loss.
Yeah, well, actually, RJ, continue on Luke's point, is I want to bring up something that happened in the game. And, Luke, this is more of a question kind of directed toward you at the end of this. But when you're talking about body language and being on the same page with receivers, the one interception that Bo threw that looked like he threw it right to the safety that was standing in the middle of the field. Like, it was it was mind-blowing, really, where you're like, that wasn't even a good throw, that wasn't even a good read. I watched it back, and it looks like Tim was supposed to have a dig on that play. And I think what he ended up seeing was that safety was sitting a little bit low, which was, he was being aggressive. But as a quarterback and receiver, is there an opportunity right now with the Ticats where is there too many choices in an offense like this? Is there too many option routes that might be confusing them? Like, we're talking about one game here, right? Let's settle down a little bit because Bo and those receivers have been playing well. But is that something that happens often where there's still maybe confusion on that side, or is it just one game, Bo not seeing it right?
Yeah, there certainly could be. I mean, we had tons of games. June Jones was the best example I can think of the opposite. That you're never going to be really confused as to a play call or what you were doing pre-snap. Now, there was a lot of decisions to make after the snap in June's offense as a receiving core, and I am talking about some of those going wrong with Bo and his receivers. But June had a lot of different angles and reads that you might make in your route. But if that's all stemming off of only 6 plays, you just gotta get good at that. If you have decisions to make after the snap, and there's a lot to learn and get through in a playbook pre-snap, like just the play call comes in, and that can be one out of any 100 plays on a call sheet, and there's a lot of nuances on there, and then you have post-snap decisions as a receiver. Maybe because it could be some confusion like that, and you get a little fog of war out there, and you think, man, I just really thought that I was going to have the seam read, and that safety, that's hard. The safety stayed in the gray area where that's the tough part. If the safety's going to ready to jump a dig, then you have your seam on that play, and that's easy. If the safety just falls back up at the snap, then right away you have your dig. It's the gray area that makes sports tough. For all those micro decisions that happen, thousands of them every play, where you have to make that right decision. And if Bo was sure enough to let go of the ball, and it was gray enough where Tim ran a seam, and again we're sort of speculating here because we don't know the play call. Nobody does. But that dig seam read is certainly that's sort of in many offenses will have a play like that where a receiver is going to curl around a linebacker if the safety's high, or he's going to run a seam if the safety is flirting up into that 10-yard depth. And so I wouldn't be surprised, Mike. And I'm thinking back to some years where with Tommy Condell, certainly Ken Austin, and if we were really having some troubles there, whether a quarterback. I remember when Dane came in for Mazzoli in 2019. We did simplify things a little bit, and we continued to play very well that year. And Dane had an unbelievable second half of the season when Jeremiah was hurt. But I remember Condell simplifying things mid-season there to make sure everybody was on the same page. And so maybe there's some of that needed. You just want to give yourself the weapons and the options that your offense can have too. So it's a balance from the coordinator's perspective as well.
Go ahead, Mike. You were going to jump in first.
Yep.
Yeah, just to finish my point, really, with what I thought of the game at the end of it, and Luke, appreciate that because I was curious about that, but also defensively, that first half they played awesome. They were switching up the looks. You could see that Davis Alexander had to pull the ball down a bunch of times, which is giving him pressure, and he was having to run almost not on purpose, but like because he was forced to, right? And in that Saskatchewan game, we're like, okay, he can move, but he's running on purpose a little bit. Didn't see it when get out. This was, oh no, the Ticats defensive line is in my face. I need to get out of here now. And I thought they did really, really well that first half. That second half was, Steve, it was exactly what you said, where when you look at the chances in a football game where it can go either way, the ball's up in the air or there's a tackle to be made, and it's defense versus offense, it seemed like Montreal won that battle of those 50-50 balls you talk about, or 50-50 tackles. They won every one of them. I can think back to the Bo pick on the seam when the corner came in to make the same play. Well, that almost exact play happened on the Rambo touchdown with Davis Alexander ripping that thing in there, and it was just Jonathan Moxey being a little too shallow in that situation, and Richard Leonard coming over a little too late and missing on his shot. So you look at those plays throughout the game, and it was 50-50. Montreal might have won all of them at that point.
You don't even know on those kinds of plays which ones are going to make the difference later on. Richard Leonard dropped one. had, in his hands. And I thought Kenneth George played it almost a perfect game most of the way, including on one of the touchdowns on the corner there, right at the end zone. He just turned a little bit to the one side, and if he turns to the other side, the play is made. And the other one, going back to the points of maybe some confusion there. First of all, I think we do know that was confusion there. That Bo thought he should have done a dig there because of the manner in which he reacted right afterwards. You could see it. You could see the way he acted. And the other one was on the 3rd and 2 early in the game, and the ball went down low to. There was some confusion there with which way the ball should have gone. I think to Luther Hakanavanu, and that was a key point at 3rd and 2 to have a turnover. To have a turnover there, but again, you've got to make those plays, and again, I think you've got to make the tackles a little earlier on the quarterback because that's a lot of time to cover guys, and they're going to make those plays. And the 50-50 balls. If you take a look at their length of passes, I think they only had two. Did they have only had two completions that were like more than 15 yards? I mean,
Tiger Cats, their longest was 26 yards.
And then another 19, and then a bunch of them under 15. So they were taking what they were given, but sometimes, so what happened deep? I'd like to ask you guys as players, what happened deep? What is going on deep?
That's what Montreal does. That's exactly what Montreal does. That's what they've done against every team is they limit the long ball. Where they win and what they do a great job at, and this is Noel Thorpe doing a great job at it and Montreal playing well, is they have a lot of veterans in the back end. There's a lot of people that have played a ton of football snaps, and they also are just very good at limiting that ball by staying deep. They switch up their look, so they'll give you the same look and have 3 or 4 plays out of it to confuse you, but they drop a lot of people all the time. They're usually only rushing 3 or 4, and 3 a lot that we saw in the game, RJ and Luke, and you probably would have noticed that. They'll bring pressure off the edge, but they'll drop enough people that they're taking away all the zones. So they force you to throw that ball underneath, and we even heard Coach Milanovic talk about it at the end, right? You need to take what's there. Bo Levi said it, need to take what's there. And that's the most frustrating part, I feel, as an offensive player is, okay, Montreal is giving me these underneath routes, but I don't want to throw these. I don't want to just get 5 yards a play. I want to go for the big one. And that's where I think Bo got in trouble this game a little bit. Is he was like, okay, I feel like I can go for the big one. And Montreal just always takes that away. So you got to take what's there for you, especially in this next game.
So it is humbling to play against this Montreal defense, the number 1 defense in the league. How much credit has to go to how well Montreal's defense played as compared to it wasn't the best game for the Tiger Cats offense, Luke?
Well, it's tough. It's a chicken and egg scenario, but I want to stay. In my mind, and as a Ticat player, you can stay focused on yourself. They have some good defense, but it's about missed opportunities. It's about little things that you can correct. Again, to start it off, I with that offensive line and their play, you got to just keep doing what you're doing. 1 sack in the game and just a really good performance. And it just comes down to Bo and his receivers and the decision making. Defensively, interesting and some really costly penalties that aren't really. It's not what I don't feel like we've been seeing that all year. Penalties are down across the league. The Ticats aren't great compared to the league. But some really costly ones there, and so it is a good team. But I truly think that this is a Ticat football team that could beat the Alouettes. I mean, you can put on any quarter and watch a quarter, and there's 5 things that could have gone better. I said after the game, RJ, the first down efficiency didn't seem like that major of an issue to me. It seemed like we weren't, and it seemed like the Ticats weren't looking at 2nd and 8, 2nd and 9 all game. They averaged 5.5 yards on first down. You'd like that to be a little bit more, but if you're actually in 2nd and 4.5, a lot of times you can manage that. To Mike's point, if that Montreal defense is going to continue to take away that long ball, then when you are stuck in that 2nd and 4, you've got to be able to have a handful, 2 to 3 of those receivers got to be really trustworthy in those low zones. Shamar Bridges, the way that he's catching the ball on his square in routes from the outside, little speed out routes, hitches. I've been really impressed with that, and I love what he does with his body after the catch. He gets his shoulders underneath pads and directly vertical. I want to see more of that from Keandre Smith, Hakunavanu. These guys need to really be high percentage throws on second down in low zones.
44% on second down conversions, even though they were setting themselves up fairly well on first down, and second in the league, Steve, on average yards gained on first down. So that
what a change.
Really hasn't been a problem.
No,
right.
And that shows you. I think, and that's a lot of that. I think RJ has happened in the last maybe 4 weeks, certainly 3, in terms of adding, because that was really a problem before, was all those second and longs and second and 9s and seconds and 10s, and when there's been a problem on defense now, it has been a little bit more on second and longs, and that's plagued this defense a little bit. Not just this year. There's been some of that. Like, well, how are they making this on 2nd and 14? How are they making this at 2nd and 10, 2nd and 9? And when Hamilton is like some of the and I'm going back to the receiver thing, but the same concept when the other team is at second and 8 and 9, and when if you guys are if Hamilton is at second and 9. There has been enough to me yards after catch, so that tells you something else, and I don't know what it is that it's telling me. That you're at 2nd and 4, and maybe you get the short pass because that's what you're giving you, and maybe you get the first down, but you don't get much more. You're not breaking that off. Like against Edmonton, that happened a couple of times when you got that yards after catch. Hakanavanu is the one I'm thinking of, but there were a couple of other plays like that there, and I don't know what that is. Maybe it's just that Montreal is really, really, really good and good tackling at all 3 stages of their defense. And their tackling has just been great, and Hamilton's tackling was pretty good until it started to fall apart, and I thought at first it was fatigue. So I went to talk to the offensive linemen, and they said no. They added an extra guy into the rotation later in the game, so they weren't fatigued at all. They didn't feel fatigued at all. So I just, I don't know where the missed tackles started to come from in the fourth quarter or partway through the third. And maybe somebody can help me here as a non-player. I don't. I mean, the tackling was pretty solid for a while.
Yeah, when I look at it, it looks like that. A lot of the one-on-ones, we talked about this, the one-on-one situations, when the Ticats had those opportunities, just weren't able to bring them down. It's not necessarily anything they need to change on the missed tackling. It's more so that they just need to be a little bit closer. They can't lose these battles when it's 2nd and 5. And we have to remember that first half, it was very good for that Ticats defense. They were all over the place. They were playing very well. You got the turnover that we've been looking for. That second half, Davis Alexander got a little more comfortable, right? You started seeing some of those Montreal receivers making some plays, making the Ticats defense miss, making those 50-50 catches, that kind of stuff. It just is one of these things where when you are losing the turnover battle, and we talk about this all the time, and you're giving the ball up as much as the Ticats were at those opportune times, that added with the penalties is just going to put you in a bad situation. So, yeah, the Ticats played well on defense the first half, but turned into what we had seen throughout the season in that second half. And when your offense is sputtering, like we talked about, it hadn't happened a lot, so that's why we're talking about it now. But the Ticats defense also has to step up, and we've said this time and time again. When one side of the ball isn't playing well, the other side has to step up. And when Bo Levi on that offense and those receivers don't play well, if one side of the ball, special teams, defense, if they can't have a better game than the opposing side's defense or special teams, then it's going to get out of hand like it did in that Montreal game, because nobody seemed to step up in that second half.
Mike, we don't know who's going to be the quarterback for Montreal. Cody Fajardo, he was taken off the 6-game injured list last week. He wasn't dressed. Davis Alexander, you mentioned he was better in the second half. I felt like when he left the pocket and was on the run, that's when he really made things happen. Fajardo's not that type of quarterback, but his results speak for themselves. So as a defense, how do you prepare for either guy, or do you kind of know who's going to start, even though the depth chart isn't out?
Well, I wouldn't say you know who's going to start. You can try to look at Montreal's Instagram page. You can try to go onto their Twitter and their Facebook and try to see if there's any film of practice, or maybe you have, somebody that's walking by the stadium that might know something, right? You start asking everybody you can. But the nice thing about the back-to-back is you can look, the film you're going to be reviewing 90% of the time is going to be the game against the Ticats, right? It's the last week, so that's the film you're going to be looking at. So you can prepare on paper like you do every game for a guy like Cody Fajardo and try to see how the offense is a little bit different than when it's Davis Alexander. But I think as a Ticats defense, you have to look at that first half and say, okay, what did we do well? And then this is where the interesting part of the head-to-head comes up, because now it's that chess game. Okay, I know Montreal is going to say, well, the Ticats will look at the first half, see what they were able to take away and how they were able to do it. And we need to figure out a counterpunch to that, whether it is Cody or whether it is Davis Alexander. It doesn't really matter. This is now trying to counter what the Ticats did well and how we can use that against them, and vice versa in that second half. What did work against the Ticats defense, and how can we, recreate that maybe out of a different formation or whatever it might be, to give those same reads to a guy like Davis Alexander. I don't think the Montreal offense is much different with Cody and Davis. The only thing you'd really want to focus on if it was Davis starting is in second along, maybe adding a spy in there, right? And what I say as a spy is rush one less guy, have him sit the extra guy that you're not rushing, have him sit about 3 or 4 yards just off the line of scrimmage. So as soon as those reckless D linemen, because you let them free, as soon as they're able to flush him out of the pocket, next thing you know, you have somebody right in his face to not be able to throw and read it downfield. So maybe something like that. But other than that, I think that offense is pretty similar with both of those quarterbacks in.
How did you feel about home and home back-to-back games against the same team, Luke? I guess for the Ticats, it could be better if they weren't playing the number one team in the league on head-to-heads, but as a player, how did you approach those?
Yeah, I generally liked them. I like Mike mentioned there, the week of prep for the second game, where the Ticats are right now. There's a little bit of a different feel to it. There's like a calmness in like the crazy film stuff. I mean, you remember, it's a game every week. You're not even, the players are not thinking about the next game until the Monday or until that game ends, and all of a sudden you're like, man, where am I flying to next week, and who is it, and what kind of defense they play? And so you get a little calmness in the back-to-back in that sense. You're like, you get a night's sleep after the game, you get your off day, and you're really kind of already tuned in strategy wise, and so you kind of get healthy and you watch your own game a bunch of times. So I liked it, but you're right, Montreal is sort of a tough one. We always had them. I felt like with Toronto, oftentimes around the Labor Day Classic. I remember multiple years playing a Monday Labor Day Classic and a Friday, even in the Rogers Center or BMO Field. So I liked that, but the Montreal is tough, and when you get beat, sort of, in all phases, I would say in the Tim Hortons Field, there's a lot of things to correct over that week. And that phase that we haven't talked about, special teams too. There is something missing from the return game with Hamilton right now too, and I want to see Smoke Harris have with a little bit more success in Montreal. Is one place you can start there.
What have you seen in that return game, Steve?
Well, it's funny because when I was talking to Scott Milanovich earlier in the week, he mentioned that he thought the secondary blocking, like the first wave, like the wave in front, hasn't been strong enough. But I also think that Smoke himself has leveled off a little bit here. He and I don't know if he's a little bit tentative on that, and I think that's an issue that you can scheme for on that secondary blocking. Again, it comes down because it's open field. Those blocks can be difficult, but it has not been there, and that field position has been quite important. It was pretty, you notice that particularly in the second half, and I like they have to have more there, and maybe at some point they have other guys around that can run the ball back. So I think Smoke needs to. He looked like he was coming, but it looks to me like he's leveled off a little bit, and I don't know whether that's because there's extra film on him. They know who he is a little bit more than they did early. So and here's what's happening in the league as you look around the league. Returns are starting to really pile up a little bit now. You're not winning games anymore without having one. And Ticats desperately need one to go with. We saw what happened with the interception. And for a return, we saw what even, with a blocked kick, those kinds of things. They need one now. They've had one from those types of the parts of the game. They definitely need one.
And you know what, Steve, too, you mentioned the field position. When you're struggling on offense, I can't tell you the relief that you feel when you go out there and you're already past your 40-yard line. When you're up at your 50 and you have a 60-yard field to go to get points, or really, 20 yards to go to get 3 points, there's just an ease that you feel, and it does help to get a struggling offense back into sort of rhythm, sort of like the defibrillator, sort of like everything's sputting, and it kind of shock, and it kind of you're back in tune there, and so you need something like that, and in a sense, it's felt like the offense has had to pick up after an ineffective return for in most drives, at least feels that way.
Yeah, it's not just a shadow of the goalpost. Sorry. It's not just a shadow of the goal post. It feels like an eclipse when you go out there. Like you really are in the dark.
Yeah. Mike Daly's CarStar keys to victory. Number one, win the field position. Both sides. We talked about the return game. Tiger Cats don't have a tackler on special teams in the top 20 in a 9-team league. That's a bit surprising. Who is the leader on special teams in your opinion, Mike?
Yeah, and the leading tackler might not be a huge deal, right? That's, if somebody's far and above better on that team, right? But I think when you look at it, the leader is Ante Litra. Like he by far is the vocal leader. You see him on the sideline. He's made plays all over the place, but unfortunately, because he's a protector in punt, so one of the guys, right in front of the punter, he is usually one of the last ones down. So when he's the one that shows up is making a bunch of plays, you're like, he's doing a good job making some tackles. It's like, oh, okay, but maybe there was a little bit of a return there. And when you look at the Ticats special teams, I said this at the beginning, and I feel like this is still the case slightly. It's still a lot of young guys, still a lot of first year, and we talk about it all the time. The Ticats are the youngest in the league. Caretaker Bob had made us aware of, and there's still a growing pain on that side as well. We talk about those are the guys that are blocking for any returner, whoever it is, Smoke Harris, Lawrence Woods. That's that second wave blocking. I feel we're losing a lot at the first wave as well. So those gunners that are down there, we're just not dominating those one-on-one matchups, and that's what it always comes down to. That's football. It's a bunch of one-on-one matchups, and if you're not winning those consistently, you're not going to win the game. Yes, there's opportunities for Smoke Harris to just hit a return and not bounce around, but I feel more times than not there's too many bodies in his face that are either unblocked or have beaten their blocks. So that second wave does have to do a better job. They're blocking the punt, right? 2, and if you want to count this now, 2 in 3 weeks, that's still really good. It's just the opportunities for returns right now aren't there, and that's where you'd like to see Smoke Harris break 1 or 2 tackles. You've seen it around the league a little bit, and I don't think that's happening from him, but it is, to use Luke's saying today, it's a chicken and egg situation where they need to block for him, but he also needs to do it on his own a little bit. But yeah, no possessions over half field for the Ticats that game, which is not helping. And we said this, when that offense struggles, because it's going to happen, which it happened this game, and it's going to happen again in the season, and if you're expecting to win in the playoffs, at some point you're going to have to face good defenses. Other sides need to step it up, and right now there is a lot to be wanting from that return game, especially with Smoke and the hype that was around that.
Yeah, Mike, you talked about the lack of possessions in Montreal territory. Luke, you've talked about red zone and red zone efficiency a lot this season. They didn't have a play in the red zone against Montreal. Were you shocked by that?
Yeah, it's I guess your percentage of touchdowns when you're in the red zone doesn't really get affected by that because you didn't have an opportunity there. So sort of statistically misleading. So you got to be careful. I'm one of those guys. I get blown away by a stat like that just to realize that it's sort of a red herring statistically. And so. Yeah, I mean that's a result of the second downs and the second downs killing drives, not having an opportunity to get down into the red zone there because you kind of look at it's one of those you just look down the offensive charts for both teams. Nothing crazy that Montreal did offensively beyond Hamilton's. I mean, Bo is almost or passing for almost 300 yards. That's Bo and Taylor Powell at the end there, but the. Rushing and passing very similar, first downs very similar. So it's kind of like, not much to pull out of that, out of those stats, but it's about drives ending too soon. So you get a bunch of opportunities if you're making up all your yards in the open field, and then you're never gaining those yards to get into score zone territory. Obviously, the points are going to look very different, and so. In this game, it's hard to comment as to what they're missing when they get into the score zone, and in Edmonton, it was much better, but that's against the Elks and not the Alouettes, and those are two different animals, if you know what I mean. So,
oh, nicely done.
So,
all right.
So it's the second down that just frustrates me to no end, and I just feel like we're up in the booth, RJ, and we're seeing James Butler pound his way for a 6-yard gain. Or we're seeing somebody make a low level catch, but like to Mike's point, the Alouettes that's not a critical error to them. Giving a catch up on first down short, it's on second down that we've got to see drives continue to move down the field, and for every new set of downs, just time-wise in the game, that's one more set of downs you're not giving your opponent. That for every set of downs you hold onto the ball, you're extending, you're managing the clock and not having the clock managed on you. And so we'll see. I want to see an increase from the receiving core and from Bo.
One of the things Scott was pointing out to amplify your point on that is it's so weird that they didn't get into the red zone because they didn't have a 2-and-out all game. They had that even when they made the 3-and-out. On the third and short, they had made a couple of first down. It was so. I feel that comes down to everything that we've been saying here, that all of us have been saying, is making the play at the time. That you're not getting you've at least got one first down, and that usually is something that gets you going. Part of it could be because the field position, you're still, if you make the first down and you start in your 15, you're only at your 25 or your 30. But it doesn't seem to, it's an anomaly that you would have no 2-and-outs and still not get into the red zone.
I think that says a lot about Montreal's defense, doesn't it, Mike?
Yeah, it's the old adage, bend but don't break, right?
Right.
Listen, this is how defenses talk, especially a defense that's going to play like this, where it's top down, keep everything in front of you, make them work for it, is at some point the offense is going to make a mistake, whether it's the quarterback that's back there that's getting a little too itchy to throw the ball downfield, whether it's a receiver not holding on to the ball when you fly to the ball carrier and punch the thing out, whether it's an offensive coordinator saying, hey, we've put a couple first downs together, now I can pull out my big shiny play that is supposed to score a touchdown here and call that one and put a quarterback into a tough situation to try throw into some deep coverage that's just waiting. It's a whole bunch of different things, but you essentially are making the offense be good for an entire game, every quarter, right, every half. It's don't make mistakes and let's see what ends up happening. And Montreal did a really good job at that, and it's going to happen again. It's going to be the exact same situation in the game in Montreal. It's going to be the same defense. There's not going to be much difference. They run very similar defense to most of the league. It's just that they're very patient with it. And if there's one thing that could maybe change a little bit on that offense is with Bo on those checkdowns that we're talking about, those underneath throws. Every play on offense is going to have 3 levels to it for the most part, where it's going to be a level that's a big play, where if you have that opportunity to throw it, those are the big play touchdowns, right? The next level is going to be those digs, those ones that are in behind the linebackers, or the ones that are like 10 to 12 yard catches, those kind of things. And then the next one's going to be anywhere from 0 to 5 yards. So every offensive play has those 3 levels. And how quickly you can go from, okay, do I have the touchdown? No. Do I have that intermediate pass? No. Get it to my check down, because if it is playing a zone and it's not man, you're not going for the end zone necessarily unless you have some drawn up. So as quickly as you can get to that check down allows those receivers and James Butler to catch the ball, turn up field before that underneath zone coverage is able to get down to him. So there's a little bit there with Bo where maybe he's holding on to the ball a little too long to say, hey, I can get this touchdown. I can get this touchdown, with that gunslinger mentality that we always hear about. Instead of, oh, I don't have this, let's get it down right away and give these guys opportunities to get upfield and make some people miss. But again, we say this all, and RJ, you brought it up, Bo's one of the best quarterbacks in the league right now. It's a game against a very good defense that they're going to be watching the film and getting better. So it's, unfortunate they couldn't win the first of the back-to-back, but there is still the opportunity here for that offense because of how well they have played leading up to this.
And statistically, the Tiger Cats have been better on the road. They've scored more points and they've allowed fewer points. So we'll see if they can get that win in Montreal. Bo does lead the league in passing yards, touchdowns, and interceptions. That's the one he doesn't want to lead the league in. But when you pass as much as he does, you're going to get touchdowns and interceptions. The running game, Luke, I'm a bit surprised with a player like James Butler that the Tiger Cats are last, and by quite a bit. The Argos lead the league, almost twice as many rushing yards as the Tiger Cats. Are you concerned about the running game for the Tiger Cats right now?
You'd like to see it, but for some reason, I just feel like Hamilton is just not a rushing team. We've rarely been. We're a five receiver team, or definitely before Scott Milanovic, and Scott has worked in more running sets. He does bring in even 8-man protections at times, but certainly 6 and 7. In years past, I felt like for all my seasons in Hamilton, we were 5-man protection and 6 at times, but it was a running back adding into the protection or a receiver. And so, we talk about, Bo's statistics. I also want to hold that in tension with the run game stats. If you're going to be not running the ball very effectively or very frequently, you're going to be passing the ball a bit more often. And so, that's one of those stat chains that everything starts pointing back to the same direction. To the one stat that matters is, are you scoring more points than your opponent? So it's no matter how you get there, and it doesn't make me just really worried. It's not like I'm not watching these games saying got to get James Butler going, because he is having an effect on the games at times. We'll see him power through for a first down a couple times. We'll see him catch the ball out of the backfield and get vertical. I think he's been a net positive on the season, even without having an outstanding rushing year like he had a year ago. And so we'll see if that ends up being a more important part of the Ticats games. I'll bet you it's because the Ticats have the lead and are playing a little bit better across the board. But Montreal got after that in that third quarter, and I just don't know what. If I'm a play caller, I'm going to be trying to let Bo Levi Mitchell do this thing through the air as well.
They're trying to get the ball. I mean, you're right about maybe if they get more of a lead. I mean, remembering three times probably they've got behind, and that's taken the pure running game out of it. But Scott Milanovic wants to get the ball to. It's two big playmakers. Let's take White out of the equation for the moment, Butler being the other one. And that long handoff, Mike and I talked about this a little bit prior to the game last week, that little short swing pass, or not even a swing pass out of the middle, because you're immediately running vertical as soon as you get it. When you look at it now, that he's touched around 20 times, he's had touches, 19, 20 times when you add the two together, the running and what I call the long handoff. And it's very similar to handoff in that you freeze. If you're going to the wide side, you're certainly freezing either the Sam or the halfback that's coming in, or the strong side halfback on the other side. That you freeze them a little bit, or that linebacker, and I think it can have the same effect as a good running game. But it's better if you can actually do the runs on those plays. But it's a matter of getting him the ball vertically quickly, meaning from the either 1 yard line behind the line of scrimmage or 1 yard over it. That kind of thing. That's my look at that.
Yeah, with James Butler, the rushing yards are probably lower than he would want, but he's getting around 100 yards combined every game with all the receiving yards he's racking up. Mike, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, this situation with, obviously put the ball in Bo Levi's hands, and James Butler's getting involved in the pass game, so it's not a huge deal defensively. There is going to be so much preparation on the other side of the ball, no matter what team it is, where it's going to be, hey, they don't really want to run the ball, so we're going to let them try to run the ball. I'm going to tell our linebackers to not sit at 5 and be jumpy on the run. I'm going to tell them at 6 or 7 and, come down to the run late. So what it's doing is an opposing defense is now making it harder for the Ticats to throw the ball. Because, hey, if the Ticats can beat us running the ball, so be it. Right? That's what we're going to let them try to do, because they don't want to do it. They want to give the ball to Bo, which rightfully so. He's been playing really well and, is shown to make some good decisions throughout the season. But the longer this goes and the more data you have and you hear about the analytics, I'm going to look at all the percentages that say the Ticats don't want to run the ball, especially on a second and medium situation. I'm going to tell my linebackers to sit back at the first down marker and say, okay, you got to throw into more people now, right? Good luck. Let's see if you can do it. And that's where Montreal has been able to, in the second half, they did a really good job, and they do that to everybody. But there is an opportunity there where by running the ball, you balance the thought process of the defense, as opposed to, let them run the ball and, we'll take away everything we can passing.
Yeah, well, that could play right into James Butler's hands. He's quite a competitor. If he does get challenged like that, I fully expect he'll come up with a big game and be able to maybe make the defense second guess and think more about the run. So Tiger Cats are equipped there, in my opinion. They're fine with James Butler. The turnover situation, Luke, could have been worse in that game. A couple went in favor of the Ticats. Tyrese Beverette almost had an interception. James Tuck, whatever happened there. But Montreal, when you're playing the top teams in the league, the penalties and the turnovers, I still go back to my very first conversation with Scott Milanovich when he took over as the play caller last season. Those were the two things he said. We've got to limit our turnovers and take fewer penalties. And I feel for him, because 115 penalty yards for the Tiger Cats in that game compared to 50 by Montreal. That's significant.
It is, and of course, a standing out one is the 25-yard misconduct at the end there, or fourth quarter, I should say. Casey Sales on Davis Alexander, and you feel bad. You feel for Casey Sales, because he's not a guy who you would think would make that mistake, and he certainly, you could see on his face the moment after it happened how he just knew how bad that was, and I think he got caught between. Not knowing if he should pull off or then how, which way to turn his body, and all of a sudden, not only did he not pull off, but it ended up helmet right on helmet, and just couldn't have been worse. And so, you got to find a way to avoid that kind of thing. There was a couple other 15-yarders, and I think there's sort of a desperation to being behind that can sometimes, it's a snowball effect where you kind of start making more of those errors because the whole team has sort of a feeling of frantic, and you try to avoid that mentality, but you're sort of scrapping and grinding to get back into a game, and you end up making a mistake because of that. Fixable though, right? Like all those, just decisions, making decisions better. But then the turnovers. I mean, do you guys want to hear me talk about the receiving core and Bo anymore? but I just go back to some of the decisions. A quarterback, Mike, I like the way that you said it. It's the speed that you can get through from the different levels, and whether it's a left to right to left read, or if it's a high low read, if you can, the speed to get there and to get the ball out of their hands, especially on a 2nd and 5 kind of type of second and reasonable type of situation. Those guys, you have to embody being the team, being the receiver or the receiving core, that is really, really, what people call a guaranteed, or slam dunk, conversion receiver. Just you got to have that to move the ball down the field. And when you continue to come up pointless, and then your opponent scores points, field goal, touchdown, you come up pointless, opponent scores. All of a sudden, the frantic energy on the sidelines is real, and you start to see mistakes compound on each other.
I want to ask you, Mike, about Kyle Wilson. He's second in defensive tackles in the league, his first year as a starter. And I know we talked on Ticats this week about who a leader on defense would be for the Tiger Cats, and maybe that vocal guy out there who gets in the other team's grill, the Simone type of guy who's helmet to helmet with somebody, jawing. Kyle Wilson seems to be a guy that doesn't mind getting involved in those situations, but he's also seems to be very effective tackling. What have you thought of his first season as a starter?
Yeah, I played with Kyle, so I know his makeup, and he's a serious competitor, and yeah, he will talk a little bit, and he's been going around and making a bunch of plays sideline to sideline, where I would like to see Kyle improve a little bit, because yes, his tackling, and he's had to move positions now a couple times, and he's all over the place, it seems like, at least early on when they were doing all the substitutions and stuff like that. It's his first real full season of coming in and being a starter. So for what he has done for this Ticats defense, it is really good. Where I would like to see him improve is making some of the big plays now, right? Those tackles, leading the league in tackles, yes, that means you're around the ball and you're hustling, but now there's opportunities where you have played long enough that as a linebacker, especially that middle linebacker, that will linebacker, that Sam, there are so many plays that you are going to have an opportunity at making or not making in a game, where a lot of that defensive turnovers, disruptions that you're looking for are from those three people, right? And right now, I would like to see some of those big splash plays from him. Yes, making the tackles are great, but from him and that Will and that Sam, there's just a lot of opportunity for us and for RJ and Luke in the booth to be able to say, like, and there it is, Jonathan Moxey again, or Kyle Wilson again, right, with a big time play, knocking the ball out or making an interception. There's opportunities.
A little more enthusiasm, there. Mike.
Well, you're the experts. I'll leave it to the experts for that, right? But there's just, the big splash plays aren't there yet. But what he has been doing is putting together a solid season. But I'm sure if you're watching the film with him, he'd say he missed some opportunities that are there. And, yeah, that's where I think everybody on the Ticats defense needs to step up a little bit. That's why that Kenneth George, I think that's why we were all so excited about that Kenneth George interception, because we're like, this is a guy we've been talking about making a play like that. And look at this. He puts his foot in the ground, trusts his read, and jumps a play. And, turn what we thought at the time we're like, okay, this is against one. Look at us go. You know what I mean? So one of those type of plays.
And Kenneth George did another one shortly after that. The following drive or the next drive almost did it again, where you could tell he made the decision to make an aggressive play on the football. That one ended up in a knockdown, but a well-earned knockdown. Like we've had the knockdown interception discussion a few times this year, and the sort of the hidden error that might be inside of a knockdown that is actually a good thing in your stat book. But sometimes if it should have been an interception, then was it good or bad? But he was really he was fighting to make another aggressive play. And what he brought up in the postgame is Jamal Peters' effect on the defense, and Jamal Peters' attitude towards being an aggressive playmaker on defense and not just a play stopper, to really be a difference maker out there, and that's the leadership and the positive influence that you need, and it certainly took an effect in Kenneth George's game.
Well, and that's the thing about defense. When you're watching film, when you're sitting down with everybody, it's not okay. How can we stop this offense? How can we make them throw it to where? Every single defensive player, whether you're a D lineman, you're a linebacker, you're a defensive back, is, okay, how can I get a pick on this play? Okay, how can I get a sack on this play? Those are the two things you talk about, is how can I get a pick and how can I get a sack? That's what everybody wants. So in order for it to happen, you have to think that way and talk about that way. And then when the game happens, it's got to turn into a mentality. And like Luke said, it was a mentality for Kenneth George on those 2 plays was, hey, I'm going to get this ball. I'm making an opportunity to go make a play as opposed to let the play happen. So it's going to build, but I'd like to see that happen with a lot of other people on that defense.
I wonder if one of the things that happened with the defense is that they were falling back to, like, in the early going. I think they were a little too tentative. You both guys have mentioned this. I wonder, and then they started to come on. Even before they started to win those 2 games, there was this little, and they used Jamal Peters as a visible example of the kind of way we want people to play. I wonder if can there be, given the results of what happened last week, can there be a setback there that now we might see a little bit more of that tentativeness that's been the problem from the start in my mind?
I don't know what you would say, Mike, and the experiences you had with coordinators, but I would say no. Like, you're not gonna want to pull back on the thing that you were just trying to get them to do, but it's always a balance. Of course, there's a way to be too aggressive in the football field. You have to play soundly. But I think the Tigers, because you're right, Steve. We saw a difference early on in the season. It was just nobody willing to sort of, you didn't want to miss the tackle, or didn't want to get beat deep. And we kind of saw the result of that. But I think they do more of what they're doing in general, as opposed to less or the opposite. But we'll see. I mean, because you certainly started to see the deep ball being completed by Montreal as that game went on, right?
And I don't mean this schematically. And maybe I didn't explain myself. I meant that on an individual level. The coaches could be doing this in one, but now you're in the heat of the, as you say, the fog of war, and they've made some plays last week. Are you going to, like, individually? Can this be a bit of a setback?
It could for sure. It could be a situation where you weren't really sure about the person you were going up against, right? And then maybe something caught you off guard. Okay, this guy is actually faster than we thought, right? But there's also what I have seen, and talking about schematically, is there's a lot more times where that Ticats defense was down and aggressive. And I was looking at the man calls specifically, and they would get up there and impress. Like the one play that Kenneth George just missed, where the Montreal got it down to the 1 there. They were all up in press in cover 1, and that's what they've been doing that whole first half. They were aggressive and jumping in their zones and getting down and challenging receivers. Now, when you play like that, and we've talked about this, when you get up there and you get aggressive with the receivers, now the play is to be made downfield when that ball's in the air. And that's the hardest play that you have to make, is you get into these 50-50 situations where the receiver knows where the ball's going, and that defensive back is just reacting. And like that play with Kenneth George down to the 1, he was just late at turning around. But that's going to happen in those situations when you're being aggressive. So I have seen it schematically a change defensively about being more aggressive. And, the players are, like I said, they're talking about how to get picks and sacks. It's not going to change. So they'll still be aggressive. It's now just a hope that when those 50-50 balls are up in the air, there's just going to be more plays made by the Ticats as opposed to Montreal this next game.
Ticats haven't won in Montreal. It's going to be close to 3 years. August 27th of 2021 was the last time they won in Montreal. Montreal's had some good teams, but is there something about playing in Montreal that's challenging, Luke?
Yeah, I think everybody who has experience in the last, let's say after the last days of Ivor Wynn, honestly, post Ivor Wynn CFL players would all say that that Montreal has the toughest stadium, sort of logistically. Like, it's just, the locker room is small. It's a dungeon underneath there. My understanding is that doesn't hold a candle to what it was like to play in the Ivor Wynn locker rooms, where you could be in the bathroom and see daylight coming through the concrete like dividers above your head. But it is a tough place to play in, and when the Alouettes have a team like they do now, it can be really tough. There's the old CFL sort of stories that you hear of guys of Montreal, the city of Montreal, getting a win for the Alouettes every now and again for things. You hope that guys can avoid things like that. But I remember playing, and I can't remember the year this was. It must have been 2015. maybe it was 16. And that was the first time the Ticats had won in Montreal in 12 seasons before that point. And so I do think of that. And that would have been the Anthony Calvillo days and stuff like that, where they had some really good teams and back-to-back Grey Cup championships and that. But it is a tough city. But I've also, Mike and I have won a few wonderful games in Montreal as well. And so it all comes down to the day of the performance and the execution you have.
One of the things, I lived there part-time for 10 years, and one of the things about Montreal that's underrated is it's a party city. So when that place is a party... And
Steve, I don't think that's underrated about Montreal, I'll tell you that
much. but that you have to make it a party, and it's when and when they're not doing well, it doesn't feel like a party at that place. But when they do, all the other things about Montrealism come into play. It really makes it. It's louder there. And the Canadians haven't been doing well. So this suddenly is a team that can give Montreal the thing that it needs right now, which is a winner. And you look at some of the biggest years that they had with the Als back way back when they were winning all the time. The Als weren't, or the Canadians weren't doing well there. So the city itself then becomes even more focused on these people that they can count upon. And when they make that one big play, it's why you have to really make plays there. They make those one big play, all of a sudden the place is a completely different animal. If you can take them out of it, it's hard to take them out of it, but if you can, it's always important on the road. But I think it's more important in Montreal than in most places.
Any experience with you, Mike, besides the horns that the vuvuzelas or whatever they're blowing in that stadium all game?
Well, Luke brought up a great point where, maybe at Tim Hortons Field we need to just make the visitors' locker room not as nice, because I remember just standing over top of each other. We barely had a locker. Yeah, and they still do. It's the same stadium. You barely have a locker in there. I mean, there's one shower, one toilet, so you could imagine what that's like, right? It's just a complete mess. But the other thing about Montreal that makes it tough to play is it seems like they have the track that's around the stadium, and the fans are about 6-7 feet up, and it seems like they're over top of you while you're on the bench, right? And obviously it's loud and all of that stuff, and it's enclosed as well, so the sound just stays in there. So it is tough to play, especially when Montreal is playing well. But a little story though, Luke, that made me laugh and gave me a little nostalgia is I can't remember when we stopped flying commercial for the Ticats, but early on in Luke and my career, we used to have to fly commercial, so our flights out would be like 5:30 a.m., right, 6 a.m. after a game. And a little bit about Montreal, where guys would arrive nice and early, and some that have never seen Montreal before would go out into the streets and say, "Wow, what is this place?" right, and be be blown away. And I would say, every road trip, we probably lost about 10 to 15 people that didn't make it onto the commercial flight the next night. So they pretty much said, yeah, you know what? We'll stay the night at every other place, but Montreal, we're going home right after. We'll take the train. So there's a little bit of that as well that I would imagine comes into play when you get into Montreal. But I'll put a positive spin on it. And Luke, I'm not sure if you ever felt this, or Steve, you felt this ever. But after a big win for a team like Montreal, like that, right, where they were down a little bit, battled back, and next thing you know, they blew the Ticats out at the end of that game. There's hopefully a little bit of a lull period the next game, where if after a big win, teams that generally are able to pull that out have this little lull. So hopefully the Ticats can jump out nice and quick, nice and early, and take that Montreal crowd out of it as soon as possible.
Sense of overconfidence.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
Yes, I remember when you get a win in a city like that. Because Steve, you're right. It's a part when the Alouettes are playing well. It amplifies maybe more than some places. And I remember some wonderful train rides home from Montreal and plane rides. And And that the track cutting off the corners of the end zone is a thing for me, for receivers. That totally changes your red zone approach. And I'd sprained my UCL, the tendon in your elbow. I wore a big elbow brace because of the end zone cut off in Montreal in my last season, and a weird thing that happened down in the end zone there. But RJ, you and I called a fun game in Montreal too. We have the Ticats Audio Network, a story of our own road trip out there, and I effectively I just let RJ call the whole fourth quarter by himself. We were missing some tech up there. It's an old stadium. We were kind of limited in our resources, and RJ lost me for the fourth quarter.
Hey, that's okay. You were watching the game, but you didn't get a broken ankle. If you've ever been to Montreal in the stands, every step is a different height. Yeah. But Luke and I were coming down after the game, and no railings or anything. It's treacherous enough.
Of course.
And you go down the stairs, and then you have to turn right, and there's a couple more stairs. One of the workers yells at us and says, "Look out!" And we look. Luke happened to be on the inside. It was half a step. But it was in the shadows because it was at night, and you couldn't see that it was so he would have fallen and maybe broken an ankle. So thank you very much.
Yes, a lesser athlete would have been totally.
That did happen.
Luke would have done a front flip and landed on his feet.
That did.
Well, that's true. And just to finish that, Luke and I were almost down. We heard a scream. The fellow who told us to look out for that step actually missed the step, and he fell.
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
that happened to a very big supporter, a financial supporter of the team in the very first year there. You know how they shoot the T-shirt things up there, and the guy kind of went to step out of the way of the thing, stepped and broke. And this is a guy, remember, and that team, had just moved in there. They're a little insecure about how they're doing in Montreal at the time, and one of their big financial supporters breaks his ankle. I think it was a broken ankle on that place. So even the people that live there, as you say, and of course you try to walk up there, and we're all carrying tons of stuff, right? We're carrying our equipment. It's a workout getting up to the broadcast booths or even to the private boxes because there's no real elevator.
Hey guys, I didn't know it was such a workout for you going to watch the game of football.
No, it's a hard job. People think it's easy.
Hey, Media Mike, we are in shape.
Man, yeah. The only good thing is the food's pretty good up there.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, we had it was the last game was there was a big lineup for the free food. We'll just put it that way in the media lounge. So
yes.
you had to, not only did you have to get exercise going up the stairs, you had to get into a cage match to get a hot dog. So
got to be first in line. Have to be the first in line, and the veterans know it up there for sure. I'm a veteran.
Well, it's going to be a big game, guys. I think we've covered a lot, and there's a lot more to come this week with the Tiger Cats heading into the week. We'll find out who's in and who's out as we get closer to game day, which is Saturday, 7:00 start. Tiger Cats are in Montreal. That'll be the midway point of the season. That's game 9 of the season. So it happens quick. We're almost midway through the season. 6:00, we're on the air with the pregame show. Mike Daly and Bubba O'Neill will have great insight heading in with a lot of guests, and me and Luke will have the play-by-play at 7:00. You can listen to us on ticats.ca/listen. Steve Milton, Luke Tasker, Mike Daly. I'm RJ Broadhead. Thanks, guys. Great show, and thank you for listening to Ticats This Week.
This has been the Ticats This Week, built by Turkstra. Whatever your next home project is, build it better with Turkstra. Visit TurkstraLumber.com today. Like and follow the Ticats Audio Network on Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast content, and get a deeper understanding of your Hamilton Tiger Cats.